This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a new friend out of the great state of California. It's Mrs. Kiernan Fiore, who is the Director of Academics at Holy Innocents School in Long Beach, California. Got connected with her a few months back, got to know a little bit about her and in the school and all the things they're doing there. And we have some fun things we're going to dive into today for today's episode. But obviously, before we jump into all of that, I want to spill any of the beans. So we're going to pass it off to her to just introduce herself, and then we will jump into today's episode. So, Kiernan, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks so much, Mitchell.
We're going to have a blast. So give me a little bit of background on yourself. And actually, you know what? Before we do that, let me ask you this question, because this is one of my favorite things I start every episode with. And it's this. If I was to visit you guys in Long Beach, California, what would you say, Mitchell, you need to eat this and do this to experience Long Beach, California?
Oh, wow. You got to eat my parents' tacos. The parents at our school are the best cooks. So maybe it's the tacos, maybe it's the pozole. I don't know. You know, the tamales are really good this time of year. So you got to come eat here at our school. And you got to go to the beach, right? But not Long Beach. You got to go down coast a little bit. Sorry.
Which one?
I don't know. I live in Orange County, so.
Okay, so which beach?
I like Corona Del Mar. Corona Del Mar.
Okay, which is how far from Long Beach without traffic?
20, 30 minutes, even with traffic. I always count in traffic.
Okay.
I live in
it's California, right? You got to count traffic. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. All right. All right. So I'm going to get some local cuisine from the parents in the school, and then go to the beach. That sounds like a good day because I like authentic food. So that's good.
Amen. Yeah, I'm spoiled. I can't. I've finally been educated in how to make my beans from scratch, because my son has a nanny who's an amazing chef. So I gotta up my game now because he's almost 2 and he's a little picky now about his food because mom's got to learn some new skills. He's spoiled by all the pozole, but now I've gotten spoiled too. So praise God.
I love that local cuisine stuff because I live in South Florida, and so we got it's definitely the smorgasbord, if you will. If you're our neighbor next door is from the DR, so Dominican Republic, and they got their own stuff that she's made before that's delicious. Then we have friends from church. Man, we got Colombian. We got so many people that have different foods, and they're all delicious. And it's so crazy how many different ways you can make a meat, from different cultures, and I love it. So it's delicious.
Exactly. Well, I am from the Midwest. I grew up in Indiana. So grew up very much kind of American meat and potatoes. Mm-hmm. And I grew up wanting to travel. I think that's pretty typical for Midwestern kids. So after I graduated from Hillsdale College, I lived abroad. I did my master's at King's College London. And then I moved to the great state of Texas, which is where I met my husband and really started my career as a teacher. And then we ended up coming out to Holy Innocents School because if you marry a Californian, eventually they bring you back to California. So I'm delighted though. I'm spoiled to be here and love it here in California. I'm the mom of 3. And 2 of my 3 go to Holy Innocents School, which is a TK through 12 parochial school, part of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, based in Long Beach, California. Okay. And I was brought here 2.5 years ago to help support their classical liberal arts curriculum, because that is my background as a teacher, a curriculum developer, and a professional development consultant. And so I came in first as their dean of curriculum and then now director of academics to guide their curriculum and instruction, do teacher training, but I still do teaching. You can't get me out of the classroom. So I'm teaching our 7th graders and our 12th graders this year.
Okay, awesome. Well, you will stay busy. Every teacher, every educator, I feel like there's always something to do. There's always it's never a dull day, I guess, at the school. And you guys do a lot. Your background is really big in education, and so we had this, our pre-call a few months back, kind of talking about some of the things we want to talk about. I know one of the things you mentioned that you want to dive into, kind of first and foremost, was talking about what exactly is a classical liberal arts education. It's like what is it?
Mm.
And if a school is listening and they're like, oh, I want to do that too, maybe what are some resources if a school is interested in also doing that? But let's start with what is that exactly?
Yeah. I think, the term classical education is a little bit of a buzzword. We always say classical liberal arts because we really see ourselves as just teaching in the tradition of Catholic education. So we're really drawing heavily on the medieval model of education. And what this means is ultimately it's an emphasis on training children in the skills of language and of number in such a way that we're cultivating the whole person. So it's very much not that we're not focusing on skills, we are, but we're focusing on skills with a view toward the cultivation of the whole person and the formation of wisdom and virtue. So the question is not just can you read, but what do you read and what kind of reader are you becoming? And ultimately, what kind of person are you becoming? So that means a lot of emphasis on character formation. As a Catholic school, obviously, it's the full integration of our Catholic faith into everything that we do. Um, and I would say ultimately that's why the school adopted this model of education is that they were looking for a way to ensure that our Catholic faith is not something layered on top, but is something woven in, that the way that we teach is in line with what we believe. But in the process, we found it so freeing to enable each student to become truly who they are meant to be. And that means cultivating their knowledge and cultivating their skills, but also their character and their unique gifts as a person. And at the heart of that, it's a very low tech educational model. We don't have a one-to-one iPad ratio. We have about 300 students, and I think we have 50 iPads. Total, which we mostly just use for testing. On the other hand, we have strong emphasis on that student-teacher relationship. So at the heart of classical education are good books and wise teachers who seek to form mentoring relationships that are based in dialogue between teacher and student.
I love
That's the heart of classical liberal arts education.
How do you foster the relationship between like teacher and student? Because obviously I know that is a big piece of most schools, but I know you had specifically mentioned it when we first talked about that needs to be strong. How do you foster making sure that actually does happen?
So I would say the classical liberal arts pedagogies foster this because at the core of our pedagogies are a series of instructional techniques that begin with what we call narration. So this is where when we read as a class, we're asking students to do a lot of the telling back. So often in education, teachers are summarizing things for the teachers or for the students. They're saying, this is what we just read. But in classical education, we'll read it together, we'll read it slowly. We'll do a lot of support for students, bring in background knowledge, teaching them vocabulary, things like that. But in the end, we're going to read it with them and then ask them, okay, tell me, what did we just read? And have the student verbalize it for themselves. And often, students say, well, I don't know, I didn't really understand. And so sometimes it's scary for the teacher because they have to hear, I didn't really understand. And then, oh, okay, well, let's go back and figure it out. But when we begin with this, then we move into Socratic discussion, which is focusing on the technique of teacher questions. And what I tell my teachers is, you are here to be the best question asker. You need to be able to think of the most incisive question that's going to help students understand the key ideas, that's going to help them reflect on how those key ideas affect their life and help them to truly internalize this knowledge in such a way that it becomes something that they live. And so from Socratic discussion, we actually moved to seminar. So because we're a TK through 12th grade school, we really get to see the whole gamut. So if discussion in TK really begins with learning just the very basic rules of conversation, learning to tell back and to pay attention when the teacher reads something. By the time we get to our senior year, we're doing full release where I have the students read and then they sit in a circle and I just listen to them. And they ask each other questions and they talk about the book and then I evaluate them. And I say, you guys did a great job of listening to each other. But I think you really didn't delve into the text. You were talking about the book, but you weren't really drawing out individual quotes from the book. And so then they'll say, okay, our goal next time is to do this. But the goal there then is that you as a teacher are in the process of fading into the background, if you notice. So we have the knowledge always at the forefront. Whatever we're reading, whatever we're studying, we're asking the students to tell it back, and we're asking them to talk about it. And then over the years, we move into the background as the student engages with the material directly and can have true ownership of what they know. So I would say our pedagogy is geared in building those student-teacher relationships that are formed in mentorship around the most important knowledge and skills that we teach in schools.
Is that something you think that naturally is happening outside of school walls, like even at that church or at home? Or do you feel like, and if not, is that hindering education if they're only getting it for a few hours a day out of school?
No. So if it sounds like you're asking too about how this affects home life. We are really seeking to involve our parents in every aspect of this. So people always say, how do you involve your parents? Well, we're a daily mass school, so a lot of our parents are here every single day, and they are having conversations. We have a very open door policy at our school, so parents are coming to observe little plays, to observe little speeches, poetry recitations in the classroom, in our all school assemblies. But in addition, we have 3 classical parent nights a year that we call them. And in classical parent nights, I bring the parents in and I do with them the pedagogies that we do in the classroom. So we do exactly what we do in class. We will read short stories, we will look at great art, and we'll have conversations about them. And then we'll talk about, here are ways to have these conversations with your students. We'll send home homework that's like that. Talk to your mom or dad about this or about that. And that starts as young as TK, where, TK homework might be, help your child find 5 things that start with the letter B. Ask them, read these words to them, and things like that. So it's a very different approach because it's based in that relationship. We are trying to move beyond the model of education that so much are used to of education as worksheets, education as checking a box. And for us, it should be something very, very human, that I have this knowledge of how to read, and I'm going to pass on that skill to you in the context of my relationship with you. And I think in this way, classical liberal arts education is really in line with what educational research is showing us about social emotional learning, and that when we educate a child, we are educating the whole person. The question is, are we thinking about educating the whole person? And in a classical liberal arts education, we say that with everything we do, but who is Juan, and what are his needs, and how do I cultivate him as a person while we're studying algebra or we're reading Homer's Odyssey or whatever that is. It's ultimately about my relationship with him and the kind of person he becomes at the end of this.
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple of years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show. With the parent part for that, I know that's obviously a piece that comes up regularly with guests we've talked to or schools that we work with, where they really want that parent partnership, like with what they're learning. They want parents bought in, and they want them on board. What are other ways that maybe you guys are currently doing that to partner with parents? Or I know you mentioned open door policy and them coming in, but are you helping to train up these parents and say, hey, here's what we want you to help them do at home with their homework. Don't let them do it on their own. Partner with this. What are some other ways that you guys are not even just at home, but partnerships with parents? Because I feel like that comes up so regularly. I'd love to hear some other ideas if there's ways you guys are doing that right now.
I think, we're in a very unique community, I think, in terms of parochial schools. So we're in a very economically disadvantaged area of Long Beach, and most of our families are here on scholarship. And so, I mean, when our families come in, this is a long-term relationship where we're going to sit down with them. Our pastor, who's our head of school, he has regular meetings with almost all of our families, as does our principal. And we're very upfront about the kind of school that we are and the kinds of things that we're going to ask. And when our principal meets with new parents, she talks to them about what's your tech policy? What do you guys like to do as a family? Things like that. Because when you're joining the Holy Innocents community, you're really joining a community of parents who are joining together with us as teachers to educate these children. And that's always our language. We have so many parent involvement events. And it's not just about having the event, but also that the language of the event is that we are a team. One of our core values as a campus is we partner with parents. And so that means if it's something I talk about with my faculty, it's something I talk about with my parents. We're very open with them. We're very direct with them. We involve them in these things and then say, okay, this is the part we're doing. This is the part I need you to do. So that's the way parent teacher conferences often are. This is what I'm doing in class, is what I need you to do. What's beautiful about that is that, we are able to welcome, I think, a lot of students who we might traditionally think of as struggling in a classical liberal arts curriculum. So sometimes we have this perception that a classical liberal arts curriculum is too challenging for students with disabilities or who learn English as a second language. And all of our parents come with very much this heart that says, I want to partner with you. I want to work with you. And then they tell us what they're able to do. I'm able to do this and I'm not able to do that. I work nights. I can't do this. And then our teachers are always willing to partner back. So, this is truly a vocation. So, I have parents who tutor their children at home because their children struggle and they need extra tutoring. And then I have parents who can't do that. And those parents who can't do that, guess what? Those kids are here, they're volunteering. And while they are waiting after a basketball game to be picked up, my teachers are doing flashcards with them and things like that, because it's a partnership. And it's not as a replacement for the parent in any way. It's very much from a spirit of, well, you said you work nights and you can't help with the flashcards. You know that she needs to do them and I'll help you out with that, right? But then as soon as they get home, mom says, did you practice with your teacher today? How are you doing? Because it's a partnership, it's a team. So I think in that way, we try to apply that relational aspect of the classroom to our relationships with our parents as well. We're partnering with them, we're coming alongside them, they're coming alongside us, and we're doing this as a team.
I love the part you mentioned of that too, Kiernan, about the principal or the head of school meeting with families and getting to know them, because I mean it all comes back to, like, do you really understand your parents' demographic? Like, where are they coming from? What's their makeup? What's their specific situation? Because obviously it is never a one size fits all. Like, we're going to do this, and it's always going to be mom, dad happily at home and able to focus 2 or 3 hours on homework at night or whatever it is. Like that's it's a fantasy. It's obviously not going to be the case. And so, like, understanding each child's situation might be a little bit different. And how can we, like you said, partner with them to say, you know what, we're going to give a little bit extra focus on Tim over here and make sure he's got what he needs. And then I love that. So it sounds like what you're doing is, like, you're really understanding your student body and what their makeup is. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think, a good example, we're blessed to have the Carmelite Sisters of the Most Sacred Heart on our campus. So we have a convent on campus, and 4 to 5 sisters are resident here at all times. And one of our sisters is our 8th grade teacher. And this year she had a group of students who really struggled with study skills, but a lot of them, mom or dad just did not have the bandwidth to do extra help with study skills. And these students were behind in this area. So sister has done these 10-week boot camps, a study skills boot camp. And it's after school, it's every day, it's an hour. And sister's like, here's how you make flashcards, and here's how you organize your notebook. And, but what's beautiful about it is the parents are just so on board and so supportive. This is something they needed. And it's not a requirement. This was sister's own initiative that she worked out with the parents. You leave your kids here and I will work with them. So I think that's part of it too, is we really try to approach everything from a teamwork perspective. It's not one person who's going to cultivate everything for that individual child. We're going to work together to make up the weaknesses in one another. And so that enables parents, I think so often, speaking as a parent, you feel this sense of, I know I need to do more of X or more of Y with my child, and I just can't. I don't have this ability, or I see my own weaknesses and flaws. And I think in modern parenting culture, sometimes we're afraid to reveal those. And we've tried to create a community where it's safe enough to say, I really struggle in math. I can't help him. How can you help me? And that in the context of that community, we can say, our parent teacher conferences are really different from other places, because when I've worked at other schools, often parents will feel really defensive. And here, because of the atmosphere of the school, parents will often say, I'm just at my wit's end with him. Help me. I need you to help me see him. And then the teacher says, oh, I do this and this works, or let's pray about it together. We'll find something that will work for him. And so it's that true partnership, where everyone says, we're going to find something that helps this child be the best he can be.
I love that. Well, it wouldn't be a classical school without some great books that are very classical books. And so I know you mentioned when we first chatted that there was a story you had from like reading Pride and Prejudice with the students. I'd love to hear what takeaways, what happened when you guys did that.
I think that it's the great books aspect of a classical liberal arts education that I think most people struggle with the most, because they often feel, well, it's a very old book. It's probably not interesting to them. It's not relevant. But I think if we take this approach that things need to be humane, they need to be human. And great books are just humans from centuries ago, telling stories about themselves and their place in time. And my experience, I've taught English now for 15 years. My experience is that when we present children with a great work of literature that is unfamiliar to them, maybe the characters talk weird or they dress strange or things like that, that nonetheless, once we open up the doors to them, once we give them enough context and help them figure out the text, they begin to actually meet people. And they realize back in 1500, people were just people. Back in 1000 BC, people were just people. And this is the great joy of reading Greek tragedy with high schoolers. And they realize they're just people. People are the same. And then they can really spend time thinking about life itself and how can we live this well. So for me, this is the great joy of the English class. And one of my favorite books to teach is Pride and Prejudice. I love teaching this to high schoolers because as soon as they get over how they talk strange and why doesn't anybody say anything directly, and I've given them all of this background, then they begin to understand it's just a story about young men and young women and how awkward and uncomfortable it is to have romantic relationships. And for them, this is immediately identifiable because I usually teach this book to 10th or 11th grade. They're all in that stage. And then, very quickly, the girls are commenting on everything. The boys are secretly writing notes on everything the girls say. Well, I just hate it when guys do blah, blah, blah. The boys are all writing it down, But the great challenge for me of these times is that we're really committed at our school. And I would say, this is an area where in classical education, we're still growing the resources that we need to support students with severe disabilities. And several years ago, we had a student in a different high school that I worked in who he had some pretty severe disabilities. And we actually met with the parents to sort of say, it might be better if he was someplace else because we don't have all the resources at the school that he would need. And she said, I mean, he's been at this school since he was in 6th grade. He has friends here. He knows his place here. Everyone here cares about him, sees him as a person. We kind of know that he's going to hit a cap eventually on how far he can progress in the curriculum. Can you try to find a way to accommodate him in the classes? It was very difficult because he was not reading anywhere near a high school level, let alone Pride and Prejudice. He couldn't read the text independently and understand it. So I thought, I was the teacher at the time. I thought, oh gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do, So I gave him a Spark Notes. I would have him read the Spark Notes at the same time so he at least knew the story. But the beauty of a really humane pedagogy, again, is it's conversational. So I'm coming to the class has read the book, and we're having a conversation, and I'm asking them questions. And the thing is, I can ask a question like, well, should Elizabeth have made that assumption about Wickham? And even if you haven't read the book, but you know the story, you can engage on some level. And once we get started talking about judging people by appearances, which is, of course, what the conversation is going to turn into, everyone has wise ideas on that. And all of a sudden, that student with disabilities is not standing out. They're giving us really great insights into judging people based on appearances, judging people based on first impressions. And the rest of the class is needing to listen and truly learn from someone else and get outside of themselves. So for me, the beauty of that dialogic model is that there's always space for another voice at the table. And that when we really have a classroom that is grounded in that type of pedagogy, the students are learning how to live with one another. Because in the real world, we don't say we're going to put you with a bunch of like-minded, completely similar peers. You have to get along with everyone. And so by having these dialogic classrooms at the heart, students are learning to truly listen to someone else and to say, wow, that's an insight into human nature and into how I should live. And so in the end, it's not about Pride and Prejudice. And that's really what I learned. My English teacher mind was sort of, I don't think you can read this book. And in the end, I thought, that was not the point. And I knew that. I know the model, but I saw it firsthand that the point was for us to have a conversation about great ideas and that everyone can have that conversation and that we were all richer because he was at the table and calling out sometimes in the most direct way, maybe little ways that other people were sort of saying, well, it's okay that she was unkind. Is it really ever okay to be unkind? And things like that. So I think for me, I find great books actually, they're challenging for us as teachers, but when we teach them well, they're the great leveler because they emphasize that we're all human and that we can all connect on that plane and we can all learn to discuss in that way. And they encourage the children to do that as well.
Hey, I just want to take a really quick break from the podcast to highlight one of our amazing partners and sponsors, ClassReach. If you're a new school administrator or founder and are struggling to keep up with all the hassles of planting a new school, like collecting tuition, communicating with parents, or handling student data, then you need ClassReach. ClassReach is the all-in-one software that helps with everything from admissions and tuition to classroom management and parent communications. Sign up for a free consultation with one of their school specialists and see how ClassReach can help your school grow today. You guys can check them out online, classreach.com. They are a kingdom-minded company, and I love their leadership team there. I've become friends with a lot of them. They truly are a great company. I support them, and I love them, and you guys will love them too. Check them out at classreach.com. Now, back to the show. And I love this too because it's giving them an opportunity to hear, like you just said, another perspective that they haven't thought of before. And obviously that is so incredibly valuable, especially in a very safe, controlled environment. Because obviously that's not always the case when you hear outside things. If you're on social media, you're just going to hear potentially one side over and over and over again, like screaming at you. And then you're out in public and you don't get the other side of it, and it's not a safe environment. And so it's like having it at the school where you got a facilitator there that can help go, well, explain that a little bit more. Where are you coming from with that? Because I know it's a little bit different, but I know for me, this was a few years ago. I had a really good friend of mine that we had completely, like, he wasn't a believer, not a person of faith at all, and his political affiliations and thoughts were completely opposite of mine. But we were really, really good friends, and what we would do is once a week get together and talk about what happened in politics that last week, and be like, what was your perspective on that, or what did you think about that? And I loved it because we were both we're both really easygoing, calm people, and so something would be potentially something that would get another side really frustrated and upset, and he'd be like, well, this is what I'm thinking. And I'm like, ooh, I never thought about that, actually, that perspective. But a lot of times we don't want to hear the other side because people get upset, they get frustrated or whatever. We don't want to hear it. But I loved hearing another perspective from somebody who was calm and collected on what they thought on their perspective. So I kind of see this as very similar to that, where you're fostering that, and it's very good for kids to see, like, oh, you can have a different opinion than me and we can still be friends. Wow. Imagine that. That's crazy, you know?
And I think, especially in our high school, this becomes really an intentional instruction in their junior and senior years. So our students take rhetoric every year. They just do it once a week beginning in kindergarten. So they learn those rhetorical speaking skills. But then by the time they get to high school, they have a full course in rhetoric every year. And their junior and senior year, that rhetoric is combined with an apologetics course. But it's a different kind of apologetics course because we sit down and we talk about, okay, so when you go to the local community college or the local state university, let's talk about when you say you believe X, the response might be X. How do you respond in a way that sees the humanity of that other person? What questions could you ask them? And we have them practice, because we think these are lost skills, and that ultimately what we want to be sending out of holy innocence are just some of the best people. And we have found this to be true. Our graduates have gone on to Catholic colleges and universities, and they've also gone to work at the Port of Long Beach. And my favorite calls are when the Port of Long Beach calls and says, I love the students who come from Holy Innocents because they're great people. They're kind, they're hardworking, they get along with everyone. And I think that's exactly it, because again, we're forming the whole person. So, if I'm going to send a longshoreman out, I'm going to send out the best longshoreman, and I'm going to send out the best plumber, and I'm also going to send out the best theologian. That's my goal, whoever they are. And that's even really where our college and career counseling focuses, not on tracks or this or that, but true discernment. What is God's call on your life? What skills and talents do you need to place at his service? And how are we going to challenge you to be the best kind of person that you can be? Because ultimately you're the measure of your character. And they know that that's the direction of the curriculum from a very young age. You are the measure of the character that you have. And that's what they're cultivating when they're here. They're not just ticking boxes and, finishing some math worksheets. Not that anyone sees education that way, but I think sometimes in a standards-based culture, we can get narrowly focused on that. Like, did I teach them long division well enough? And I would say for me, the classical liberal arts model always frees me to do what my heart is as a teacher, and the heart of every teacher I've ever known, which is to say, who are you, child, and how can I help you be your best self?
Yeah. Just because you got a 90 or 100 on a test doesn't mean that means you're automatically going to be successful and a really good person leaving the school. It's like, what's one maybe component, but there's others that go into play with all of that. So that's really good. I know you had some random, I think, some takeaways that we wanted to kind of touch on at the very end before we wrap it up today. What are some other takeaways that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I think that the classical liberal arts model, like I said, is kind of a little bit of a buzzword these days. And the number one question I get from people is, how do I do this model in my environment? And I think that this is where we mistake the forest for the trees. And we get so focused on, I think that my students don't have the reading level to read this book, or I think my teachers don't have the background to do this type of pedagogy. And sometimes we have to just begin, and we have to trust the model. Because again, it's a model is very human at its heart. And so, my background is in classical education, but when I came to this school, they were new in learning about it. And what was beautiful to me was to see how far teachers had come just through saying, I'm going to do the classical liberal arts model. I'm going to read real books. I'm going to ask real questions. I'm not going to use tech. I'm going to try to get away from worksheets, and I'm just going to read. I'm going to read a lot. I'm going to tell them, I don't know this book. Let's read it together. And they had come so far because I was like, that's it. That's the model. You got it. You did it. And so I think often in doing that, in our fear that we're not going to do the model right, sometimes we say, well, I'm going to do this compromise. I'm going to read abridged versions of a lot of classics or things like that. And I just always encourage teachers, every student you have can do more than you think they can. And go ahead and get out the book and just read it with them. One of my favorite stories from this school is when I first came here, I said, okay, well, we're going to read an unabridged version of the Iliad, obviously a translation, but we're going to read an unabridged version. And the teachers here felt a lot of fear, like, can they read it? Because our students tend to struggle in reading. We have quite a few who are struggling readers. And I said, yes, they can. We'll help them. And it was so beautiful to see. It was hard for them. And it took a whole semester. And when they finished, they loved it. And then at the end of the semester, we did this showcase from our academy. And they did a seminar just on the stage for the parents. So the students sat and the teacher asked them questions and they talked about the book. And the passion with which they talked about this book, students sometimes who had reading levels 2, 3 grade levels behind, but they had worked so hard and mastered this hard and challenging thing. And what was beautiful is that it took time, and yet the knowledge that they could do something hard encouraged them to do something even harder. Right? Because as soon as you say, oh yeah, I can do that, then all of a sudden that next thing is slightly less scary. So again, I think in a standards-based culture, we'll get really centered on should should we read the Iliad with students who are struggling with reading a grade or two level behind? And I think it's the wrong question. I think the question is, do my students have something to learn from Achilles and Hector and Odysseus? And if they do, I'm going to find a way to help them access this story. And in doing that, they are going to grow their skills. So
That's good.
I suppose as a classical teacher, I always think we need to ask the right question.
Yeah. And hopefully never stop asking questions, because that's which I'm really good at. I love asking questions. I love talking. Yeah, questions are good. So let me end with this. If you were to share one final piece of advice with the school leaders listening today, what would your one final piece of advice be?
So often in education, we forget that schools are full of people. And for me, the classical liberal arts model ties me to always remembering humanity first. The humanity of my teachers, the humanity of my students, of my parents, and that the model should be humane. It should be something that cultivates what is uniquely human about us. So I suppose my challenge is, if you look at your school, do you see everyone becoming better humans? Not getting great test scores, not winning a lot of awards, but what kind of humans are they? Are they just amazing, beautiful humans to be around? And if they're not, what do you need to change? And for me, that's where the classical liberal arts model comes in. But I think that's the key question. When we're going that direction, we're not going to go wrong.
Real quick on that, let me a rebuttal question or a follow up on that. How much do you feel like that comes from the school that they're in and the family that they're in at night, where they're sleeping there, and obviously, like, how do you feel like that plays out? How they become?
I mean, obviously, we know that family is the first thing that cultivates a child, but I think also every person can point to a teacher who's transformed their life. And so I think when I listen to stories of, I had a wonderful family of origin, just a very beautiful childhood. But then when I meet people who maybe don't share that same background, and yet I see a similar character in them, there's always a human being at some point who enters their life and passes on not just knowledge and skills, but character. And so I think that we as a school are supposed to be that for everyone, whether they're coming from a wonderful family of origin or a family of origin that's struggling, that we are a place where little people can learn to become better people, the best kind of people.
Amen.
And as Christian schools, we believe they're all made in the image of God. So that's how we do our work before the Lord.
I love it. All right. I love it. Well, Kiernan, obviously, thank you for taking time out of your day. Like I said, we said before we started, I hear the kids playing on the playground, having the best time of their lives, enjoying a great childhood. So I hope you got some peace and relaxation away from the crazy recess time. And thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise. And obviously, wishing you guys nothing but the best as you finish out the rest of your school year.
Thank you so much, Mitchell.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Kiernan for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what they're doing over there in California. And of course, like everybody else, I'm wishing them nothing but the best as they continue to grow and educate the next generation that is coming behind us. And as always, I'm hoping you guys were able to take at least one thing away from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Now, before you go, you've probably heard the spiel before, but I want to make sure if you haven't, you will hear it this time. And we have 3 free resources available here at School Success that we want to make sure you are taking advantage of and you're not missing out on. The first one is, of course, the podcast. We are dropping weekly episodes of the School Success podcast every Monday morning. We want to make sure you're not missing out on them. So go subscribe, completely free, and then you will not miss an episode when we come out with these every Monday. The second free resource is on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. In the top right-hand corner is a button called the School Success Report. We send that directly to your inbox every single week with different articles the team has either written or found online to make you, the school leader and educator, more successful. successful. So we also don't want you to miss out on that. And then last but not least, we have our free Facebook community called School Success Makers. I'm personally in there. I would love to see you in there as well. It's a great place for you to get community built up in the education space, ask questions, get to learn from others, and have a place to, obviously, like I said, build community, which is so incredibly important. So make sure you're not missing out on that as well. And you guys are awesome. So obviously, I hope you guys are doing great in the school year or wherever you're at right now in your school journey. And as always, we will be back here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.